Depression is bad enough when it affects the individual, but when she has a baby and the baby is also affected, that's double, and it's really quite serious.
Judy, thank you so much for joining me here today at AAI to talk about your extraordinary work with Every Child Succeeds home visiting program based in Cincinnati, which you founded in 1999 and lead. You're also a professor of pediatrics at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, which is a key partner in the program. Can you tell me a little bit about how it was started and what the program does?
Sure. The way this program got started, I think, is fairly interesting because there is a leader, an incredible man in Cincinnati named John Pepper, who at the time that all of this started was the president and CEO of Procter & Gamble. He read a book called Inside the Brain that was written by the science editor at the Chicago Tribune called Inside the Brain. So John went to the United Way, where he had been quite active, and I happened to be on the board. And he said, we're doing a lot of very good things for many people. What we're not doing is focusing on the population 0 to 3 in the ways that we should. John is an evangelical person about early childhood, and when he challenges you, you listen. So a few of us got together and started thinking about what an intervention could look like. What could we bring to Cincinnati that would actually address these young families and their children? And out of that grew what is now known as Every Child Succeeds. We looked at best practices across the country. We talked to hundreds of people in the community. And we came up with a strategy that has been implemented now for 20 years. We've seen 54,000 people. That's mothers and babies. We have made close to 650,000 home visits with evidence outcome information for each one. When we put this together, we needed 3 founding partners. One was the United Way of Greater Cincinnati. They brought the business element. The Community Action Agency in Hamilton County brought the community. And Cincinnati Children's brought a number of things, including the emphasis on research and evaluation. Because from the beginning, we have had a dual focus. One is high-quality, evidence-based program delivery, and the second is solid research and evaluation, not only for our work, but also to inform the field.
Mm-hmm. So what exactly does Every Child Succeeds do?
We have 100+ home visitors. Most of them are social workers, child development specialists, a few nurses, who are situated throughout 7 counties, southwest Ohio and northern Kentucky. We engage moms in the prenatal period as frequently as we can, and about 2/3 of them we're able to get then. The home visitor establishes a relationship with the mother, and that really is where the magic happens, because through that relationship she is able to help the mother and the child achieve the very best outcome for the child and the family. In the early period, we visit about once a week. As we get towards the end, which is close to age 3, the visits decrease. We're very interested in fostering autonomy and not dependence. So the whole focus is on creating a family structure, with the home visitor being the person that the mom can work with, to create a family structure that is both independent and fosters the mother's own sense of herself.
What populations do you target? What is the profile of the families that you're working with?
They're almost all low income.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, the mothers are young. The mean age is about 18.
Very young.
Yeah, they're very young. I mean, we've had moms in this program who have been 11 and 12, which is stunning. They're typically unmarried. They typically have had little or no prenatal care. And then we go into the secondary characteristics, which are things like substance abuse, social isolation, domestic violence, and other forms of toxicity that exist in the environment.
So what's the, if someone were to say, these are young women, they didn't make good choices, they're going to have to deal with it. Why should we be going to this kind of extraordinary effort to help them when they ended up in a situation that they essentially created? What is your thought about that idea?
Well, it's not something I haven't heard before, but our belief is that everyone wants to be a good parent. Our role is to help them do that. And if a mom is a good parent, she does better, the child does better, and we as a community does better. So many people have said that the first 1,000 days of life, the first 3 years, are more important than any 3 that follow. We believe that. We think if we can help the mom, and when I say help, I use that word guardedly, because what we want to do is help her to learn to make better decisions, to use resources better, to help her child long after we have gone. If we can do that, then all of us benefit, and it's an investment that you make early, but the investment is far less than what happens later when that hasn't happened in terms of the social expense and all of the things that we know that disturb us.
So what are the kinds of outcomes that you measure your success by with the mothers and with the children? You look at both sets of outcomes, is that correct?
We do, and we do it on a per visit basis. So we have created a large data file with all of those visits that I mentioned earlier, with many outcomes for each one. Some are physical health, developmental health, safety within the home is always a big one. The mental issues are large. And I would like to just stop and mention something there that I think is important, because with our research, we want to understand what's going on with these families and then be able to do what I call actionable research. In other words, how do you take what you're learning and turn it into something that you can actually deliver on? And we recognized soon into the program that well over half of our mothers were clinically depressed. When she's clinically depressed, she has nothing not only for herself, but also for her child.
Can you just say a quick word about what that looks like? What is a clinically depressed mother of a baby? What do you see if you were to observe that? What would that look like?
It's somebody who has trouble getting out of bed in the morning. It's someone who can't respond to the child. What we know is, as these brains are developing so early, one of the very important things that happen is interaction between the mother and the child, or the caregiver and the child. It's the fathers too, and in about 14% of our families, the fathers are pretty involved. That doesn't happen. She can't do it. Her world is flat, as we all understand what depression does. And depression is bad enough when it affects the individual. But when she has a baby and the baby is also affected, that's double, and it's really quite serious.
And what kind of effect does it have on a baby to have a depressed mother? So you're describing a mother who may physically not even, she may be in the other room because she can't get out of bed. She's just unable to respond to her baby. What effect does that have on the child?
The children just don't develop the same way. I mean, we have, what we know about brain development and the synapses that form is that a lot of the exuberant development of these synapses is related to stimulation, a stimulation in the environment. And there have been a whole lot of studies that have been done where they have actually been able to look at the brains of children who have been stimulated and those who haven't.
Stimulated, you mean really by people, by social interactions.
By interacting, by someone
Right,
talking
right.
to you, by somebody
Not by an app.
No, it's not an app.
Human interaction.
It's touching, it's seeing, it's feeling, it's all of the sensory things that go on that cause these synapses to form and the brain to develop. Well, when this baby is in a situation where the mother can't do that, there's a significant effect.
So you've developed an intervention called Moving Beyond Depression that's specifically targeting women who are in this situation. Is that right?
Yes. When I talk about actionable research, that's one of the best examples we have, because what happened there was we understood the mothers were depressed. We looked in the community for resources or some intervention that could be used. Typically, they're not there. And if they are there, these are not mothers who have a car in the driveway and somebody to babysit. I mean, they're not going to be able to get to the service even if it exists. So we created something called Moving Beyond Depression. And we have therapists who actually go into the home, work in conjunction with the home visitor. They make 15 visits. They use cognitive behavioral therapy. And we've had amazing success with this. And not only is it being used in Cincinnati, but 10 other states have adopted it. Not whole states, but programs within states. So that's a very good example of something that we identified through research. We developed an intervention, and we were able to implement it with our moms. And with Moving Beyond Depression, the whole idea is that the depression comes back. So if she has later in her life, she begins to be depressed again, she has tools that she's learned that can help her alleviate the situation.
So what kind of feedback have you gotten from the mothers who participated in Moving Beyond Depression?
Lots. I mean, gratitude that is I am not eloquent enough to be able to explain to you what these mothers say, but it's changed their life. It's changed their life. It's changed their baby's life. It's a really good example of why we need to pay attention to these littlest children, these infants, and the environments that they are in, because the other problem, or another problem, and there are many, has to do with what we call toxicity in early childhood. That's things happening in traumatic things that happen to the child, where the child witnesses. It could be violence, could be deprivation of a variety of in a variety of ways.
So violence might be, for example, domestic violence.
Exactly.
Like the mother being beaten up in the presence of the baby. And babies, that affects babies?
It does. I mean, children understand what's going on, I think, far more than we've ever known before.
Right, right. And then deprivation would be something like the baby's just sort of left alone in the crib and for long periods of time, and no one comes to responds to it.
Nobody pays any attention to them at all. And that's where I think the home visitors perform this wonderful service, because they explain not only why it's important to react and respond to your child. But they show moms how to do it, and you can see it. You can see what happens.
And see the impact on the baby.
Exactly.
Which is inspiring to the mothers.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. What have you found are the keys to a program like this being successful? So as you know, there's something that I think is some people describe as the model wars, different program models for home visiting. There are debates about which one is best. Which one are you, and what do you think is most important about whichever model it is?
We actually operate several models. We use Healthy Families America. We use Safe Care for children who are in situations where there have been reported cases of abuse. We use the Parents as Teachers curriculum, and we are just in the middle, right this minute, of bringing back the nurse-family partnership. I think that what's important is not so much the model, it's how it's implemented. They all have strengths and weaknesses because our populations differ, and some are more rigorous than others. But a lot of it has to do with how, on a local level, a program is actually delivered. And I think as a field, we need to spend more time looking at that. It's not, we have to keep the families in the forefront, and not whether it's this model or that model, but rather how can we actually document what's going on with the family and how this program is making a difference.
Because I imagine that it boils down to the quality of the relationship between the home visitor and the mother. Is that correct? Is that?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, to me, that is the key to all of these programs. It's well-trained, sensitive, insightful home visitors who can develop a relationship with this mother or this caregiver that allows the work to go on. And if that doesn't happen, the program's not going to work.
Right. Do you feel that in the overall field of home visiting, inadequate attention is paid to that dimension?
It certainly needs more, I think, because that's the essence of what we do. We do have curricula. We deliver curricula.
Right.
I mean, we're different from some other interventions that don't deliver a curricula in the same way. But when I talk about home visiting and what home visiting means well-trained, insightful home visitors who are making a connection with the family.
Who are establishing a strong, supportive relationship.
Because so many of these families don't have that.
Right. So it's filling an enormous vacuum in some of these mothers' lives.
So when we talk about why we need home visiting programs in a society, that's certainly one very good reason. Because these families don't have good role models, that does not mean that we abandon them. I think what we need to do is do the best that we can to help them develop skills, empathies, strategies themselves,
right,
so that they can do a good job.
Which then means they're providing a much better role model for their own children.
Well, we know that this is at least 2 generational. And Dr. James Heckman, who's done some of the seminal work in this field, he's a Nobel laureate in economics from Chicago, has recently come out with studies that have shown that there's even a 3-generational approach. So it's the parent, it's the child grows up, and the child becomes a parent. So there is a cascading effect that it's very hard to calibrate and that we may never see, but it's there, and we know it's there.
Yep.
We've often thought that although we call ourselves Every Child Succeeds, which was what we named ourselves originally, it really should be Every Mother Succeeds, because that's the key.
Yep. So over the last several years, as you know, home visiting is kind of taken off with the federal McVie program. I always forget what it's maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting program, known as McVie, and then increasingly at the state level, including in Ohio. Yeah. What's been going on in Ohio? How is the Ohio been doing more in this area? And more generally, what do you see as most exciting about this kind of taking off or beginning to? And what worries you the most, or where do you see the potential for pitfalls if we're not careful?
Well, I'll start with what's really good. Our governor, Mike DeWine,
he's a Republican, correct?
He is. And he, I met him at a small luncheon. I mean, this is a while ago. And there were about 6 of us there, and we were supposed to talk about our programs. So I told him about Every Child Succeeds. He became intrigued. He came to see us, and then he sent some people from his office over time. And when he decided he was going to run for governor, one of his initial platforms was, I want to triple the number of children who receive evidence-based home visiting in my state. And he used the words evidence-based, I think, deliberately. He ran on that platform. He was elected. The very next morning, I mean, hours after the election, he appointed a woman named Leanne Cornion to be the Director of Childhood Initiatives in the state of Ohio. And he has been steadfast with his commitment. I mean, we have far more money than we have ever had before. Statewide, our budget was $40 million. It is now $70. A big problem is implementation. You have to find the home visitors and train them, and we're all working on that now. But it is just remarkable what he has done in terms of supporting early childhood. So we're pleased about that, and it's the first time that I can remember in the years I've been associated with this that there's been that kind of support.
And then from the federal level with the federal McVie program, I think that's really been a kind of an impetus for the growth in this field. And whenever something grows, there's an opportunity for great things, and there's also an opportunity for things to kind of decline in quality. What are your thoughts on how that is or might play out?
I think there are a couple of things, Katharine. One is the word evidence. We use it a lot, evidence-based. What I don't think we as a field really have addressed adequately, if at all, is what that means. It's one thing to say this is the finding that I have, but the causality also matters, because if you're going to be able to scale these programs to address populations at a level that is greater than ours, I mean, we've seen 27,000 families, it's 54,000 people, that's 20% of the need. We need to be able to do things that are able to work for more families than that. So how do you do it? But you have to be able to understand what you did right to make it happen. And I don't think that there's enough of that has happened. And there certainly is an opportunity there.
And I also would imagine that another dimension of that issue is evidence of what? So it has to be evidence of something that matters. substantially, as opposed to something that's evidence of something that's fairly trivial. Is that also
Well,
an issue?
I think so. I mean, we have long lists in our program. I have 8 single-space pages of performance metrics that we measure. And we're better than most. The reason is that Children's has been a part of us since the beginning.
Cincinnati
Children's Hospital Medical Center. And when we went to them initially to find out if they would join, they said yes, as long as you have a strong research and evaluation component. So we've been doing this since we started. I can't tell you, however, that we always know why something works. So it's not just what is the outcome you're getting, but why is it happening? And then if you understand that, you can scale it. One of the other things I'm concerned about, and this is for the field more broadly, is because implementation is not consistent across programs, across states, sometimes some programs get outcomes in one place and they don't in another. And we don't understand the implementation part. And where there are examples of implementation not working well and the program looking as if it is not making a difference, it could cause the whole home visitation field to lose the funding and the attention that it's getting now, when actually it is an intervention that can work, that can produce the outcomes that we want, but we've got to do it right. So those are 2 things I'm certainly concerned about.
Yep. So I want to ask you, I want to end by asking you about your own childhood. You grew up in West Virginia, right?
I did.
And your father was a general practitioner?
No, my father was a pediatrician.
He was a pediatrician who made house calls.
He went to Washington University when pediatrics was a brand new specialty. I mean, his number in the American Academy of Pediatrics, I think, was pretty low, and most of the pediatricians in the United States knew each other. But he came back to Charleston, and he would take me with him on house calls when I was a small girl. And one day into this program, I had an epiphany, and I thought, we're back to house calls. But he always said, and I think it was so wise, that he learned so much being in the home, understanding the milieu in which the family lived, and the dynamics that are hard to see when you're in an office now. So I think that's probably stayed with me, and it's a kind of strange finding.
So you are in some significant way following in your father's footsteps by being a pediatrician who makes house calls to some extent.
No, it's true. I mean, that's what we do. Our intervention is a house call. We call it a home visit now, but it's and I think it's important to also to acknowledge how pediatricians and children's hospitals need to be part of what's going on with home visiting. We've been really lucky because of our relationship with Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. But I think that there's a role for pediatricians and family physicians, because all children, regardless of their income level, eventually end up with a medical provider. They have to become immunized. Children get sick. They need to go to the doctor. And I think that some better collaboration between the clinical pediatric services and home visiting is something that I certainly would like to see. To
bring it closer to the field when your father was practicing.
Well, and home visiting is not the answer to everything. Home visiting is part of a solution. And as societies, we need to do a better job of triage. I mean, which families really need home visiting, which ones don't, which ones need a truncated version. It's important to know that, so that we use our resources better.
So you founded ECS when you were 60,
I did.
correct? So you have been working. You've been working in this field for a very long time. ECS kind of as a later life project. When you look back, what are you most proud of in your work?
Probably the families that we've been able to help. People, as people grow older, they start to think about legacies. What is my legacy? What have I done that will come after me? And when I think about all those families that we have served, and I think about, as I read the other day, someone said our children are messengers into the next generation. These are people I will never know, but I sincerely believe that their lives are different, their lives are better because of what we've been able to do. So being able to assemble the resources and a great team of people to make this happen, institutions that care, a community that rallies around, that's pretty good.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, that's the end of our discussion with Dr. Judith Van Ginkel. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, remember to like the video or leave us a comment. And be sure to check out the rest of our videos and research from AEI.